Hey, Stacey David here, and this is the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Cornwall Tools, the choice of professionals since 1919. That's right, over 100 years building tools and still going strong. If you need tools, check them out. You won't be disappointed. All right, let's get rolling. You know, one question that I get a lot when I'm talking to people is, what does it take to become a car flipper? I want to flip cars, man. I have a lot of people talking like that. And it always makes me chuckle because there is a big difference between a car flipper and a car person. Kind of like people that flip houses, that doesn't necessarily make them house people. Just to clarify that a little bit, if you want to get into flipping cars, there's no problem with that. That's just like looking out there and going, you know, I think I'll get into building houses. I think I can make money doing that. Nothing wrong with that. And then there's people that get out there and go, you know, I think I can make a living buying and selling cars. There's nothing wrong with that. That makes you a used car salesman. That's because that's what you're doing. You're buying and selling used cars. And there are good used car salesmen, and then there are, of course, the not so good used car salesmen. If you want to do this, obviously you want to be one of the good ones, which means you want to be honest. Now, the whole idea that behind flipping that people get into is they want to make money. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a car enthusiast or a car lover. Their main focus is making money. So you have to remember that when you're dealing with these guys. If you're dealing with a flipper, you know they just want to make money off of the car they're trying to sell you. So they're not necessarily going to be honest with you about what's wrong with the car or what it needs, and they're not necessarily going to tell you all that you need to know about it. They may not know because they're not a car person. They're not a car enthusiast. So the first thing you need to decide is how you're going to approach this flip thing if that's what you want to do. Then you need to, get in there and start realizing that if you're going to buy and sell cars, are you going to just buy them and just turn and sell them and try to make a quick profit? Or are you going to buy them, do a little work on them and try to make more profit? Or are you going to buy them and restore them and try to make top profit off of them? These are three completely different approaches. So you really need to think this out before you get into this, because the thing that makes me sad when I see people trying to jump into this is people think there's just a lot of free money out there. They think, yeah, I'll just go out and shake the money tree and, that's what I'm doing. I'm flipping cars. It's like, it's not that easy. Believe me, if it was that easy, everybody would do it. And there's a lot of people trying to do it. And a lot of them are finding out, dang, I'm losing money here. Yeah, I saw a guy the other day. He was into something upside down. And I tried to buy this car from him for a decent price, and we're about $3,000 apart. And he's like, well, I don't want to lose money. I got to get my money back out of it. It's like, well, you bought stupid. I mean, you bought $3,000 over price, and nobody's going to give you that. And that's part of being, if you're going into this as a business thing, you got to know when you've made a bad decision and made a bad purchase and chalk it up as experience and take the loss and move on. Can't just sit on it and demand your money back. That's just not good business. So if you're going to try to do that, you need to approach it as a true flipper, as a business. Now, here's where the problem comes for most people, is that if you approach it as an enthusiast, in other words, you're passionate about cars, that does not necessarily make you a really good flipper, because you love all the cars and you want to keep them and you want to put them in your garage and you want to drive them. And pretty soon you got a collection of cars that you're supposed to be buying and selling. And you're putting money in all of them. And now your wife is mad and your kids don't have shoes and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to become that person. You have to be careful with that. So you can't keep the profits. It's just like if you're a cook or a candy maker or whatever, you can't make all the candy and then eat it all. That just makes you fat. You can't do that. You have to realize, it's like, listen, if you're in business as a baker, then you have to sell your baked goods, even the best ones that you make. And it's the same thing if you're going to be a flipper with cars. There are deals out there. There are ways to do this. and not be the typical slimy used car salesman. One of the things I would suggest that's really important, if you're going to do this and try to buy and sell cars, you need to keep up with the trends. You need to know what's hot, and you need to know when it's not going to be hot. And you got to really stay up with this. If you don't, you get stuck with a garage full of garbage that was hot, a couple of years ago and now is not. I have got many, many friends that have collections and garages full of stuff that they bought at auction or whatever years ago for a certain price, and that market has completely gone away. And now they're sitting on cars that they're trying to get $30,000 and $40,000 out of that are only worth $5,000 to $12,000. The price has completely dropped. So they're just sitting on these vehicles. They didn't get rid of them when the market dictated it, held on to them, and now they're just taking up space. And what happens once you get in that position, the cars start to deteriorate faster than they're appreciating. Let me repeat that again. They start to deteriorate, in other words, rust, and go back to dirt into the ground faster than the value is appreciating, especially if the value has started to drop. And you got to be really on top of that. As soon as you see that start to happen, you need to do something about it. You need to take a loss. You need to get rid of the vehicle, because a little loss is better than a big loss. And you have to look at your profit margins the same way. Anything is a profit. If you buy a car for $100 and sell it for $120, you made a $20 profit. Now, that's not the big bucks that everybody wants to get, but that's the reality of this kind of thing. Profit is profit, and loss is loss. So you have to look at that the same way. So if you buy a car for $100 and somebody offers you $75, and you found out the whole bottom of this thing is rusted out and the junk guy's only going to give you $50 for it, then I'd rather take a $25 loss than a $50 loss. Does that make sense? So it works both ways. And if you stay up with the market and you stay up with what's going on and you buy wisely and don't buy your passions, then you'll do okay. Now, there was a key thing that I said right there I'm going to go back to. You don't buy what you're passionate about, because that's when you buy stupid stuff. That's when you're an enthusiast. Now, see, if you buy something and you're an enthusiast, price doesn't matter. And if that's that dream car that you've always wanted, you'll spend whatever to have that blue, Mustang that you've always wanted. And that's okay, because that's the car you wanted. You're going to take it. You're going to enjoy it. You don't mind spending money for it. You don't even care what the market is. And that's fine. That's the enthusiast aspect of it. That's the passionate aspect. That's not a good mentality for a flipper. So it's really important to approach this the right way, because if you don't, you could really get in trouble and make some bad decisions buying a car. And whatever you do, don't listen to your buddies. Don't listen to some thing on the internet or whatever. As far as values, do your research. Watch what's happened at the auctions. For goodness sakes, don't watch auctions from 5 years ago. Watch and keep up with current ones. Keep up with current trends. And try to keep up with what's going on in the magazines. Try to keep up with what's happening. And you also have to keep up with the economy. You have to know how people are spending. All of this kind of stuff. This is not just sit around and collect free money. That's the big thing. And if you do that, you'll buy things at a good price. You'll be able to sell them at a good price, so you'll have return customers, and it'll work for you. But that's the only way to make it happen. When gearheads get together, it isn't long until the subject of tools comes up. Because tools are what make all this possible. You guys know that. And car guys and girls are passionate about tools. What's good and what is bad. And that is one thing that I have to give Cornwall a lot of credit for. They'll listen to what the pros are saying about their tools and constantly make changes to build them better. That's why they have new screwdriver handles and ratchets and all kinds of other stuff coming out all the time. It's not just to get your money, which a lot of people think. It's the never-ending quest to build a better tool. Because Cornwall knows that if you're not working and getting paid,
they're not getting paid. That's why they're America's oldest tool company and still going strong. Check them out.
You know, we were talking about some stuff the other day. I had Mark Vilbert in here from the Jeepster Man. And we were talking about Jeeps and things like that. It came up, how we grow up, as you're a kid and growing up, and even as an adult, you get a perception of certain things. And you think, that's the vehicle that I want, or that's the thing that I want. And then something comes along that you realize your perspective might have been a little off, or maybe it was narrow. Maybe it needed to be broadened a little bit. And that is where, people call those learning experiences, learning moments. And if we're smart, we'll listen to them. It's like, you're growing up and you got to have, a Telecaster guitar, and then you find that Les Paul, and all of a sudden it's like, I didn't realize I want that sound than the other. And it's the same thing that happens in the car world. For example, this is something that happened to me when I was a kid. I was probably junior high age, probably 12, 13 years old. And we always grew up with Jeeps. Dad always had Jeeps. And they were always utility vehicles. We didn't drive them around much. We'd go get our Christmas tree in one. We'd go deer hunting in it. And Dad would use it to pull stuff around the house. But it was used like that. It wasn't a daily driver. And these were old flat fenders, old military Jeeps and stuff. I grew up in Idaho, so those were around. Then when I got up in junior high age, Dad went through the Land Cruiser craze. And, he'd get these vehicles, which I loved the Land Cruiser. But he didn't keep that. And he and his brother kind of had this competition going. His brother had this little CJ5. And so Dad would always get some Jeep, and they would compare them and turning radius and all that other stuff. But anyway, so one day he brings in this Jeepster Commando. Now, keep in mind, I'm junior high age, and this is like in, the late 70s. And that was the most uncool vehicle I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, what? And it was yellow with a white top. And I'm like, I looked at my brother and was like, what? You couldn't get a real Jeep, Dad? Come on, man. Of course, that was the era when, you had the big tires and all the KC lights on there and winches. And that was the cool stuff. And Dad had this stock Commando. So we're like, oh, come on, man. There's just no cool factor in that at all. You drive it to school and people will be like, what is that? It's almost like a station wagon, but not. Which was already a step in the wrong direction. So anyway, we were up one time, and Dad was one of those guys that, he was Depression era. So he would always save stuff. He would never put it into four-wheel drive until he had to. He always was like, doesn't want to wear anything out because he didn't want to have to fix it. So we'd be out, deer hunting or something, and Dad would wait until we got out in the mud and was spinning tires. Then he'd go, boys, get out there and not lock those hubs in for me. We're looking at each other going, you're supposed to do that after you leave the road. The idea is not to get stuck and spin the tires and then turn it into four-wheel drive. But Dad, he was like, no. He goes, I don't want to wear it out. So I'll turn him in when I need it, which usually by then we're stuck anyway. So this is kind of the dynamic. And we were coming back from this place one time, and somebody told us we'd been out camping. And it was me and my dad and my older brother, just the three of us. And so these people had told us that if we cut through the mountains, we would save about 2 hours of time than taking back the interstate, which was huge. We could make it in 45 minutes, what would take us, 2.5 hours. So we're all over that. And they're like, yeah, man, it's a great trail, and it's not even a hard trail. People do it all the time. It's, an afternoon deal. So off we go in this Jeepster Commando. Now, keep in mind, this thing is as stock as can be, narrow tires, that kind of deal. So we get about 20 minutes into this, and this trail's kind of rough, but we're going along no problem. And then we hit this place. There's this huge puddle going between these narrow trees, and there's 5 or 6 big lifted Dodge, Ford, Chevy pickups and Blazers, all the cool stuff. It's a bunch of four-wheelers, and they can't get through there. the hole is too deep. And they're getting in there, and they got these big, they got 38-inch tires, and they're trying to bog through this, and they're all getting stuck. And they have totally chewed up the trail, and that's the way we need to go. And we come pulling up in that little Commando, and they're like, the road's closed, can't get through. And Dad goes, well, what's the problem? They say, well, it's been raining, and it's muddy, and we can't get through. And if we can't get through, there's no way in Hades you're getting through in that thing. They're laughing at the Jeep. And Dad goes, now we're faced with driving back and going around the long way. So now we're way behind. Dad's not about to do that. So he looks around a little bit, and he goes, I'll make it through that. And immediately, I look at my brother, and my brother looks at me, and he goes, we're going to be stuck forever. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to be pushing, man. So I'm like, what are we going to do here? What is Dad going to do? And I've seen him pull some real seriously cool stuff before. So I got complete confidence. I just don't know what he's going to do. Now, keep in mind, my perception is just like the guys with the big lifted trucks. I'm looking through the obstacle, and it's impossible. That is an impassable object to get through, an impassable obstacle. So Dad gets in the Jeepster. He goes, get in, guys. Made sure it was locked in four-wheel drive. And he goes out, and he goes off to the side, and he threads that little narrow Jeepster all through the trees and around and bypasses the whole obstacle and out the other side. And those guys were standing there with their jaws hanging to the ground going, I can't believe that he just did that. Because their trucks would not do it. They were too wide. They could not follow the path that he went with that Jeepster. And bam, it hit me. It's like, wow, okay. This is a situation where a guy knew his vehicle. He knew how to drive it, first of all. He knew its limitations, and he knew its the pluses that it had. It was narrow. It had great four-wheel drive, had great traction, and he used that. And it completely changed the way that I looked at that vehicle. And the other guys, too, they're all like, they're looking at their winches, and they're like, I don't need that. The guy just went through there. So after that, I started to look at that Commando a little different. And I got to where I really liked him. Of course, Dad, he was an original guy. Didn't want any modifications. So I'm like, please, can we put some big tires on it or a winch or a lift? And Dad's like, oh, no. So I've always wanted one. So we picked one up the other day, and we're getting ready to do it on the show, and it's going to be fun. And my dad doesn't know about it yet, and if he's listening to this, well, he knows now. But I want to get him out there, and except I'm going to be driving, and I'm going to get that sucker stuck. And I'm going to say, Dad, get on out there and turn those hubs in. That's only fair, don't you think? All right, that wraps it up for us today. Make sure that you check out the Gears TV website. We got all kinds of cool stuff there. We got a couple new die casts coming out. Got some books coming out. We have all kinds of things going on. But the most important thing is get out there and turn some wrenches yourself. Get a project. If you don't have one, start working on it. And if you don't have tools, check out Cornwall. They can help you out there. Also, don't forget to check out Gears on Gears Nation, Amazon, Mav TV, and Motor Trend. All right, we'll see you down the road.